Hello and welcome to Vibrant Living Diaries, the podcast where we unlock the secrets of how you can renew your inner vitality and relearn what it means to live a life with energy and purpose. I'm your host, Danielle Grobman, and I'm proudly here with the International Wellness Alliance. This alliance is home to experts across the world whose specialties allow us to cover the entire spectrum of health and wellness, and bring that knowledge to you right here on this platform. Just as a disclaimer, the stances our guests take on this podcast and the topics we cover are not representative of our individual perspectives. If you're planning on making any lifestyle and/or health changes based on what we cover here, please consult your main medical wellness practitioner to find the best next steps for you to take on your wellness journey. Our guest today is Pat Slattery. From growing up in the midst of poverty, surrounded by 15 siblings in a 3-bedroom house, Pat became a multi-7-figure entrepreneur driven by the desire to support his family and create a better life for them. With an upbringing plagued by high rates of unemployment and crime, Pat could have easily succumbed to the negative social programming that dictated failure. The topic of conversation in today's episode will be centered around the poverty cycle and the importance of resilience and having a strong why. We're very eager to have Pat with us, so without further ado, Pat, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's an honor to be here.
The last we spoke, you mentioned that you grew up with, I believe it was 15 siblings. And seeing as how that's how you started in this life, I think it's only fitting that we start this podcast today addressing that. How did that experience shape you in your entrepreneurship journey just from the very get-go?
Well, I guess when we grew up, I had 9 brothers and 6 sisters. So there's a big age gap too. Some of my family were quite successful, I think, in certain ways. But I think how did it shape me really is we had a very strong bond actually in our family. And we were very tight with each other always. And I guess we the one thing we had was a really good work ethic. And that really spilled right down through, well, most of the family, right? Some of them wouldn't work to warm themselves, as we say here in Ireland, right? But in most cases, they were good workers, if you like. So we had a good work ethic. And I think that really stemmed and something I took on board really when I was growing up with my family.
When you hear about people going through, I guess you can say the rough times that you went through, because you mentioned that you guys were struggling a little bit. I don't want to use the word poverty, but you said that it was definitely tight around the house. There can sometimes create that sense of rivalry and competition. Do you feel like there was that, or was the bond so strong that you were able to kind of push through it and it didn't really have any kind of bearing on you?
We were certainly competitive with each other, that's for sure, Danny. When even to talk about poverty, I guess really, were we poor? Yes, we were. Were we aware of it? Sometimes. Did we have a good childhood? We did. My dad, if he was alive today, would be 102 years old last week, but he broke his back when he was 42. So we were raised on £71 a week. That was the pension. So we didn't have money. We didn't have a lot to spare, if you like. So we often joke, we say in a family as big as mine, it's first up, best dressed, and sometimes first up, best fed. You think about the rivalry. Yes, of course, because we're always going to be competitive. My siblings were all very close in age. Only 11 months between my younger sister and me and my older. Then 2 years, a little bit over 2 years between me and my older brother. You know, our age, we were very close in terms of age gap as well. And yes, we would have been competitive growing up in all areas. One of us got something. You know, it was quite a rare thing if anyone in the family got something, so everybody wanted what they had. You know? So we used to say there used to be a lot of fights in my house because of socks. Everybody's getting up to get the best pair of socks, you know, that were in the house. But we were competitive, but we took care of each other at the same time. But we certainly were competitive. I mean, there were a lot of battles in my house growing up too, you know.
Do you think that competitive edge gave you a leg up, you could say, in terms of an advantage when you started with your entrepreneurial journey? Because I remember you told me you worked, I think you said 5 jobs at once one time. Was that where did that stem from?
Well, honestly, I mean, that came from hunger. I was hungry for more. I wanted to have more. I wanted to have things that we never had. Every moment I worked, I got paid for. That meant I was bringing in money, which was really a scarce commodity in my household growing up. So that's what really pushed me there. I would say whether it was a competitive edge or not, probably not from a family aspect in terms of pushing me into my entrepreneurial, because we didn't have very much expectation as kids growing up to become entrepreneurs or even to have the ability to dream or to think about dreaming about something, because every day was a day of survival for us. I don't think that was there. From my older siblings, yes, I guess my eldest brother, who would be 20-something years older than me, I mean, he was a professional bodybuilder and had won some national competitions. He inspired me, and he had a lovely white Cortina, Ford Cortina car. You're probably too young to remember the Cortina, Danny, but it was a class car, you know. And he would come out and visit us because he was married very young as well and had left home. And when he come and visit us and he'd pull up in the car, like I used to be fascinated by the car. I liked how he looked. He was in really good shape. And that really pushed me from a competitive side of things because I was in the gym from very young, and I guess that side of things. But also, I had an auntie who was exceptional when I was very young. Kind of took me under her wing as well. I spent a lot of time with her, and she used to run the duty free shop in Shannon Airport, and she was there for 35 years. And her role was when any of the presidents and dignitaries would arrive at the airport, she would be the meet or greeter. So I guess I got a different outlook in life or possibilities. She taught me how to read before I went to school. I will never forget it. There used to be a magazine called JWT and Sunway. They were actually holiday magazines. You see the pictures of people sitting on beaches in Spain, which was like a whole new world. It was something you only saw in the movies. That probably instilled something into me too, to see that there were possibilities outside of what I was growing up with, which was normal to me. So I think that all played a part really in my life, I suppose, as a kid, in terms of where I wanted to be at. But the truth is, did I think I'd be an entrepreneur? I didn't think I would be. But from a very young age, I used to go picking blackberries and wild plums. I would make jams and I would sell them door to door. And at 12 years of age, my next door neighbor decided he was going to start delivering bread to houses. And I started selling bread, and I was selling 400 sliced pans a day, door to door, at 12 years old. So maybe it was there, but I didn't realize it. I was just happy to get the job, Danny. I was just happy to be able to make money.
I grew up in an environment where it wasn't as poverty stricken as I remember we were speaking about last, but there was definitely poverty surrounding me, and I saw the vicious cycle of it, especially when it comes to the martyr complex that kind of accompanies it. People in lower class areas or that have lower incomes, they typically don't see the possibilities, they don't think of a future, and they're a bit more cynical in nature. When you were surrounded by all that, because I can only assume that you were surrounded by this kind of negative energy, even though you had influences that were inspiring to you, and you mentioned that it shaped the way that you viewed the possibilities, like you could see it, for example, and you could kind of like start to imagine like, okay, like maybe this could be a thing that I could have in the future. How did you not get sucked into the basically vortex of, oh, you're never going to amount to anything because no one around here has, and you're only going to be poor for the rest of your life, and kind of just this draining energy?
I think very early on, nobody ever said that to us, right? But society had created an expectation for people who come from a neighborhood where I come from. And when society creates that expectation and it's really instilled into people that if you come from an area like that, there's not going to be much opportunity, then you start to believe it. This is what I call programming. Society programs you to believe the conditions that you're living in are the conditions you're going to be in for the rest of your life. And it's a challenge to move beyond that. But I think when I was 14 years of age, I left school and I went to work in a hotel. Well, definitely the most prestigious hotel in my city where I grew up. And I met, I actually discovered that people outside of my society were actually nice people. Previous to that, when you grow up in an environment where there's over 80% unemployment and there's a lot of issues, everybody outside of your community is the enemy. And that becomes a common way of thinking. People in those communities are very loyal to each other. And by the way, I had some exceptional people in my community who were great support to me as I was growing up. But most people, and I say most people, and I say this respectfully, don't believe that they can amount to very much. And usually, again, that's because of what other people might think and what other people are saying. And I do remember one particular time, because I used to have to wear like a tuxedo in work, right? I was a hall porter or a concierge, to call them hall porters or bellboys, right? I often say if they gave me the title of concierge, I'd probably be still there, right? But I used to have to wear like a dicky bow, right, or a bow tie. And I remember one time getting on a bus, a really hot summer's day, and when I was growing up, we used to go swim in the river, right? All of my friends, we go swimming in the river together, and I guess I was dressed for work, and I looked really smart, right? And something I took from my dad, my shoes were so polished, they were so clean, everything just looked really well, and some of my friends were heading off the river. So I was on a shift from 4 p.m. until midnight or 1 p.m. in the morning. So I was kind of heading off in the afternoon, and it was a really nice sunny day. And the guys were heading off in their towels over their shoulders. And they were calling me and said, are you coming swimming? And I said, no, I'm going to work. Now, again, I was only 14 years old. And then I got this, no, he won't come. He thinks he's better than us now. Just because he has a job and look, he's all dressed up now, he thinks he's better than us, so he wouldn't be with us, you know. I was seriously tempted to get back off the bus and go. I didn't want to lose my friends. I felt it was quite scary because all of a sudden now I'm leaving that community of friends. And I'm going into an area where I was probably concerned was whether will these people accept me and will I survive in some place that I'm not familiar with. But I knew I needed to earn that money, so I got on the bus. Now on the way in, I can tell you, I was also infuriated. I wanted to go back and fight my friends, right? Because you know how dare they say that I'm not one of the lads anymore. You know, so that was a challenge, and that was a challenge that I came across in many ways as I started growing into adulthood and started growing my business. However, I will say I employed most of my friends. And I think that was one of my biggest motivators, actually, when I did get into business, is that I could go into an area where nobody would give people a job and hire people. And people I knew I could trust, and people were so loyal to me. I do have the memories, and they were tough memories. And, you know, and sometimes it's not that people told me I couldn't do it so much as to how they just kept changing the subject because they weren't able to have the conversation with me. And sometimes, you know, you'd feel because all of a sudden I have some money that you feel, you know, that are they getting embarrassed around me now? Or sometimes you think, you know, and of course, sometimes they were saying things behind your back. And then I guess I found the conversations a lot of the time were very negative conversations. And again, I say this respectfully and not anyone in particular, but in some cases, you'd find yourself involved in gossip. Okay, because people have a lot of time in their hands when they're unemployed. And I changed my way of thinking, and I used to try and change the conversation, and that made people feel uncomfortable too. So I guess as I was growing and as I started to see the opportunity for business and I see the opportunity for growth, most of the people that were surrounding me at the time didn't have the same vision and probably couldn't understand it. So that would have been a bit of a challenge very early on. And I say early on, that's probably into my mid-20s. So there was quite a long period of time where I struggled with that. And I often talk about sometimes you have to walk alone, right? Even though I was surrounded, and these were good people, by the way, they're not bad people. They just didn't understand what it is that I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. And in most cases, they didn't believe that they could achieve it. So therefore, they usually instill onto you what they believe about themselves. Sometimes I would have been told, don't get too big for your boots, or maybe you're pushing too hard, or you're trying to grow, or, you know, all these different things that would come up. And you would have to put in the back of your mind, you have to say to yourself, I know what I'm going to achieve. I know what I'm going to create. And even though you're surrounded with people who are loyal to you and will work with you, but you sometimes have to keep your goals to yourself. And you just got to be there in that place where you need to be and surrounded with the people that you're surrounded with, but you got to keep going. You got to walk alone in your mindset and the way you think and in your approach to life, and just accept that they're not being mean or bad or anything like that. Is just the beliefs that they're carrying. And those beliefs are so strong that it doesn't allow them to live the life that you truly desire because they don't believe. And usually those beliefs are driven by fear. And that fear is usually something that's a story that they may have downloaded from somebody else. Because somebody else told them, hey, don't tell anybody where you're from when you're looking for a job. Right? Don't do this. You know, don't forget where you are. Then sometimes when you do move outside, don't forget where you come from. I mean, if I was given a pound for every time somebody said to me, don't forget where you come from, you know, then I discovered a great answer. I said, I don't. That's why I'm never going back there. You know? So sometimes you will be challenged, Danny, but you gotta find your space in your own head and understand that sometimes you're gonna have to walk alone. And you're growing your team. Once you start moving into this space and you start thinking differently, you're beginning to outgrow your team. And again, that's not a disrespectful thing here. Some people have so much ambition and there's only so far they want to go, and that's okay. But that shouldn't hold you back. And any of your listeners, they should focus on what it is they want and understand that sometimes you will have to walk alone.
It is said that the path to the top is a very lonely one. And it's interesting that you said that you even employed your friends, because there's, I forget who said it, but there was like a saying that you never employ your friends and your family. Maybe it's because of this mentality of, you know, wherever you came from, that's what you're going to hold on to, and those are the limiting beliefs that they have and that they'll probably bring. Did you ever face yourself having to kind of coach people out of this mentality when you were employing your friends, or were they already kind of just like you, like ambitious, hungry, ready to go?
No, in most cases, I would have coached them through that without realizing I was coaching them. because in most cases they just wanted to earn money. That was it, and they wanted, and to have an opportunity to have a job. Now I do remember one particular time I had just bought a new home, and one of the guys had come into the office and said, he said, "I'd love that, Pat. I'd love that opportunity." So I said, "Okay, let's sit down. Let's look at your salary. Let's look at how we can do this." And I looked at his salary, and then I got a mortgage broker who I used to be referring a lot of business to come and visit the office. So I said, let's sit down, let's do the numbers here, and tell me if he could apply for a mortgage first, and will he qualify, and for how much. So we sat down, we done the sums, and I said, right, there you go, that's how much you can get. Now go and look for a house. And I ended up doing that with quite a number of people in my office, and people who grew up where I grew up. And again, it's not about dissing where I grew up, but the reality is, there is an issue there. I mean, there's high levels of unemployment. But I still speak to these guys today. I suppose the real reward here is I see the opportunities that their kids have had, being able to move into that different space, So, yeah, whereas they weren't overly ambitious, I certainly inspired them in some ways. Certainly, I believe I played a part in their journey. I never looked for that. I don't look for the answer in that. I just see if I played a part. I don't need somebody to come and go, "Hey, thank you, Pat," and give me praise for that. Right? I see it and I recognize it myself, and that's good enough for me. But sometimes, as I said, on that journey, most of these guys, I mean, yes, I employed family and I employed a lot of friends, and I will tell you honestly, friends were in most cases extremely loyal. I think one of my brothers, I fired him and hired him more than I did anybody in my company. And but of course, that's what brothers do. That's what we do, right? We fight with each other in ways, but we take care of each other. Some of them really moved on and started to achieve more. And I know that I played a part in that just by giving them an opportunity to see that there was something outside of what was normal to them, and that they could earn money. And that, in some cases, it was just a start to get them to go on a holiday for the first time in their lives. Some people just to be able to buy a car, to have something to take their family away, to do things that they've never been able to do. So that was a reward for me, Danny.
It really sounds it. You mentioned that in the beginning you thought you were chasing money, and then you realized that you weren't and you were chasing something different. Do you think that as you kind of reflected on what it was that you were actually after, you were able to instill that? Or did you find that for everyone it's their own kind of drive? Like they need to feel it inside of them. It's not something that you can say enough times and then it's going to seep into them, because a lot of people when they start their companies and they hire people, they're trying to instill their vision of what they want into others, and it doesn't really stick sometimes. And you said that your friends were incredibly loyal, some moved on and they did other things, and I'm assuming some didn't, and some maybe stayed with you. How did you find that what you wanted, were you able to kind of translate that to them, or was it more of just like we're all going for something and we work together, but that something wasn't exactly the same, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, let's see. This is actually, that's a great question, Danny, because I do a lot of work with companies to install vision into their company, and to create a good culture within their workforce in order to grow. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners trying to push their culture and their vision on their staff. And they try to motivate them with money, by the way. And money is never the motivating factor here. Because if it was, people would just do more overtime, right, and earn more money. What I've discovered here is when you involve your people in your vision and you let them acknowledge that they're part of it, but within that vision, we have to discover theirs. So when I work with people, I want to know, what do they want? What do they want, and why do they want it? And what's important? And how can I be a part of that? When they work in my company, how can I be a part of that? And if they need support and they need to have a conversation, that they knew they could reach out and we can have a conversation. Again, the question you probably asked in terms of finding that level of desire, well, nobody can give you that. Nobody can give you that. That's something people have to find themselves. That's what comes from deep inside. But when you do have that desire and you make a choice to do something, you see, what happens, most people are looking for instant gratification. They want a big win straight away. Or they know they have a desire, but they don't know how. And that's okay. You don't need to know how. I certainly did not know how I was going to I didn't even know I was going to end up where I've ended up way back. I was just trying to earn some money. And as a result of the growth that I felt, and again, it was in my early 20s when I really was introduced to the world of professional development personal development. And I started to realize, I was listening to these guys' stories and I thought, these guys are just telling my story. I do this naturally. I mean, and this is meant to be magic, right? I just thought this is the most natural thing to do. But I really done a deep dive into it and I wanted to understand more. And the more I started to study human behavior, the more things I recognized and the changes that I could apply to my life. And now in the beginning, I was trying to fix everybody. I think I drove people crazy, right? Because not everybody wants to be helped. And I had to stop that and realize that if I can help people, then I have to show the way. So we have a term we say, show, don't tell. And I think the world needs more people to show up and to show up and be the best version of themselves so they'll inspire somebody else. And when you can create that level of inspiration, then somebody is going to find that inside themselves. Somebody will recognize something in you. And even, Danny, the fact that you're doing these podcasts of what you're doing here, you have no idea of the difference these will make. There are so many people out there, and it's going to have a knock-on effect that is going to change people's lives. And you might never meet these people, but you got to continue doing this, knowing that that's going to happen. And that will happen. Somebody maybe listen to my story or somebody else's story, or you know what, maybe your story, Danny. Maybe something that you say. And that will inspire. Somebody will recognize themselves in you and they allow themselves to take a chance and step up. And then they'll start making better choices. And they start making better choices, then let me tell you, you can be, do, and have absolutely anything that you want in this world.
In terms of finding that anything that you want to do in this world, how has your vision changed from when you just began till now? Because you said in the beginning you thought that you were just chasing money. You just wanted to not lose your job, for lack of better words. You just wanted to keep it. Now I assume it is not that. You've grown since from that vision. Could you describe a little bit the transition from where you grew up to making your first million till expanding and scaling and growing from there, and how that's changed your vision and your perception on what you want for this life?
Well, I guess in the beginning, I was chasing money. I needed money to create things that I never had. And even when I was 19, I bought my first house. I bought it with cash. I remember going into the building society to apply for a mortgage. I was 19, and the lady looks at me and goes, "Oh, aren't you so cute?" And she called another lady over and said, "Oh, listen to him. Isn't he so cute? He's looking for a mortgage." And they advised me to go out and enjoy my life. And I just thought, I want to buy a house because at that time, my girlfriend became pregnant, right? I was living in a flat. I had left home at 16. I was living in a flat for a couple of years. So it was time to move from that flat into a house and find a home for my child when my child comes. And I couldn't get a mortgage. So I lost the house that I wanted. And eventually I just kept saving and saving and saving until I found enough cash to go and buy the house that I wanted to buy. And then, I think I didn't buy my first car until I was 23. I had other guys driving me around all the time when it came to my work and my business. I had, my friends, I would use their cars and they would drive me. But I remember when I bought my car, my first car, and I had my home, I remember it dawned on me, I've just achieved what over 80% of the people in my community couldn't achieve. And even then, I felt like a success. I felt I was really successful. I had just achieved something that most people in my environment couldn't achieve. So that in itself was a big win. And then, of course, I was getting offered more and more work, and I was going to take it. I meant I was making more and more money. Until eventually, I found myself becoming what I call almost a victim of my own success. I was working 20 hours a day, right? Trying to keep everything moving. I end up having quite a lot of staff. So I would get home in the evening, grab my dinner, get into bed for 2 hours, get up, get showered, go again. I might get home till 5 o'clock in the morning. Then I get back up again and I go at 7, because my business was a 24/7 business. I had guys working in retail, security and retail outlets during the day. Then we had them on construction sites, so that would be starting at 9 a.m. in the morning, right? Then on construction sites at 5:30 until 8 o'clock the following morning. Then on bars and pubs from 7 and 8 o'clock in the evening. And then in nightclubs at 11 o'clock. And then we had other work that we had to do in patrols, right, to secure places. But I grew the business so fast that I was now becoming a victim of my own success. I was making lots of money, Danny, lots of money. But I had no life. Something had to change. And I'm glad to say this one I understood that I needed more time now. I need more time. And because as I said, my son, who's almost 33 now, I hardly saw him for the first 10 years of his life. I thought I was building a dream for him, but sure, I see him in the morning, give him a cuddle. Maybe sometimes when I come home, I might do a night feed at 5 o'clock in the morning. But that was my connection, my level of connection with my son, because I was working so much. So I had to change something. And I did, thankfully. And I started to learn how to work smart rather than work hard. I thought about all the things I had learned over the years and how can I apply it to change my life. So I started deciding, what do I need to do? I need to discover what I'm not very good at and hire somebody that is. And I started, well, matter of fact, actually, I recruited from within my company. So the first thing is I recruited one of my guys who was working with me, who was very loyal, and I made him my operations manager. So I got him to take over the running of the operations and managing the staff, managing the rosters. And that alone gave me back nearly 45 to 50 hours a week. That's how much time I spent on that. So then I started employing other people to take over. I brought somebody into my office to start doing the admin work, and that gave me back an extra 30 hours a week. Before I knew it, I was working 4 hours a week, but I was out then growing my business because I could build relationships with my clients. And my business was actually growing tenfold without me being stuck in it. Instead of working in the business, sounds like an old cliche, but it's true. I started working on the business.
Did you find it hard to initially transfer that responsibility from you to someone else? Because that, in essence, was your child. And I want to touch on your actual child, but a business for a lot of business owners is like a baby. You have to nurture it, you have to feed it, you have to watch it grow and help it grow. And if something goes wrong, then the first thing people want to do is blame, or they just want to take all the control and say, no, I need to do it. Someone's going to screw up. Someone's going to do something wrong. And they never want to release the reins. Did you find that that was the case as well? Or was it easy at that point because you weren't spending time with your son and you were just at that tipping point?
Initially, it was difficult. However, when I started putting together my program to create this, I had already made very conscious decisions. So I knew I could manage it better. Now, before I started doing this, there were times that I was trying to hand things over. Like even going on a holiday, it was ludicrous, right? And could I give away control? I remember one time I ended up going to hospital, right? Of course, I had worked so much, it created an illness. So I ended up having major surgery in my stomach. Of course, but I still thought I was Superman. And I remember on a Wednesday, I'm in the hospital on a Wednesday, and I'm sitting on the bed filling out the roster. And I have my phone, I have one of my guys there, and I have the mobile, and I have everything, and I'm telling him, right, this is what needs to be done, this is what needs to be done. And I put myself on the roster for Friday. I'm going in for surgery at 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon, and I thought I'd be back at work. I was 4 months on a liquid diet, right? I was taken out of the game for nearly 6 months. And that was, when I say it was a bit difficult, it was, in a way, it certainly happened at the right time, because I had already prepared my business to be at a stage where it could operate without me. And even while I was out, when I say I was out sick, I had my phone, I could answer calls, but I didn't do very much for quite a while. But my business grew, right? Because something I learned, and I certainly feel I applied it, and not initially now, but I had to agree, and not only agree, but I encouraged my team to make mistakes. So they had to feel they had permission to make a mistake. Because that was the biggest fear. People fear that they'll let you down. And if you're going to keep beating your team up every time they make a mistake, then they're never going to make any decisions. They're not going to do anything out of fear. So for me, it was go out and make the mistakes, but don't hide them. Come and tell me if you make a mistake and you've discovered you made a mistake. Let's sit down. Let's look at it. Let's talk it through and make sure it doesn't happen again. That's the only way we're going to learn. So I was grateful that I did give that opportunity. And I'm also grateful that I didn't make too many mistakes.
I think a lot of the fear that we have when it comes to other people is, I think it really is all in our head, because no one wants to let anyone down. And a lot of people are just thrilled to even have the opportunity to begin with. And I mean, I can even speak for me. I had a closer who wasn't able to close a call, and he was beating himself up left and right about it. And he sent me, it was maybe like 2 paragraphs of like an apology and like, I'm going to do this better and I'm going to do that. And I just remember I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so unnecessary." But it gave me such confidence because I knew that when he performed in the future, he wouldn't make the same mistake twice. And it's not so much about discouraging people from making mistakes. It's just letting them know that it is a mistake. It's okay. You'll survive it. It's just a mistake. It's not the end of the world. And that really goes such a long way.
It's crucial when it comes to growth,
Yeah.
right? Because the reality is we've all made mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes in the beginning.
Yeah.
So what makes me think that the people who come working for me won't make mistakes, right? and that's why I say encourage them. If I encourage them, then we'll have conversation. So I said, go make a mistake. What, and we quite openly say, hey, what mistake do you think could happen here? So when we look at doing different analysis, I would do an opportunity analysis within my business, but I also do a threat analysis. So what's the threat? What do you think could go wrong? So we'd address that beforehand when we set out our action steps and we set out what has to be done. We said, well, what do you think could go wrong? Where's the threat? And then we put as much in place as we can to avoid that completely, make sure it doesn't happen. But unless I was prepared to allow them to make a mistake, that conversation would never happen. So we have to have the conversations. That's what's really important here when it comes to your team.
And kind of piggybacking off that, I remember one of the worst bosses that I ever had was one that was a hypocrite in that sense, making it like you can't make a mistake because if you do, then you're an idiot. What's wrong with you? You're stupid, and like really bringing you down, making it like they're holier than thou, for lack of better words, and that they've never screwed up anything before. And it really does show you a lot about not only the company culture to kind of bring it back into full circle, but also just like how confident you are in your business. Because if you're going to get so worked up over one mistake that you think it's going to blow everything to pieces, well, then you must not have a lot of confidence in what you're building. Because if it's that, on unsturdy a foundation, that one mistake is going to make it all crumble, well, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
When you've been building your business and you've been scaling and you've been bringing on new people and taking people out and all these different things, what has been one of the most pivotal lessons that you've learned as a leader in terms of making sure that no matter who is coming in, who's going out, the vision is always clear in terms of what you're building and how people can grow and see themselves not only working for a company, but like with people, like with a vision?
Well, the first thing that I do is when I take on any staff, even when I employ people, I have my 14 points of culture, and I share my 14 points of culture with my clients and with my staff. When I bring people into work in the business, when at interview stage, I will actually give them the 14 points of culture. And I ask them to read them, and then I say, "This is who we are, and this is what I stand for. What do you think of that?" And if they don't get it, it's unlikely that they'll join the company. When we give our points of culture to people, that's an expectation. That's a statement of intent. And that's an expectation that I set for myself, and that's how I live my life. And anybody who comes working with me needs to understand that's who we are, that's what we stand for. And if that's uncomfortable for them, then there's probably not a place for them in our company. The truth is that has rarely ever happened, because when people read it, when I give the points of culture and I go through it with people, I say, listen, just so you'll be very clear, I read my points of culture every day, Danny, since I put them together. I remind myself every single day of what I stand for. In a busy world where there's a lot of noise, and I think this is something that your listeners could really, really do with understanding. Because I got great advice from a good friend many years ago. He said to me, Pat, before you go into that meeting, you should take time to reflect and remind yourself of who you are and what you stand for. He said, any meeting, before you go into any meeting, remind yourself of who you are and what you stand for. And that's when I created my 14 points of culture. And I want to be reminded of who I am and what I stand for. So I can step up into this world and deliver with absolute integrity and feel really good about what I do and what my intention is, and that other people understand it too. So when I involve people in my business, they understand from the get-go. And I would ask them, how can we improve? Also, when I hire people, I would make it very clear, I am part of the team. Yes, I am the owner, but I'm part of the team. And I want to be challenged as much as I challenge you. If I have a person that's a yes man, we won't get on. I want somebody who's prepared to challenge me, to be able to speak up. But the one thing, Danny, I can say I pride myself on is I'm always approachable. Anybody can approach me with any problem and they can speak their mind. And we will find a way to fix it, whatever it is. And sometimes, even with my team, with anybody working for me, they could come and talk to me. They could come and talk to me about anything. I had an open door policy. And sometimes it might be something personal gone on in their own lives, and they just might need a bit of guidance. And sometimes they just want to let off steam. Well, that's okay. I've got big enough shoulders. I can carry it.
I really like that selfless take. I think it's one that it not only provides a lot of sense of security within the team, but also you need to have that within yourself. Because if you know that you have the shoulders and you can carry people, then you know exactly what your threshold is. I feel it. Like at the end of the day, if you know that you're going to crack under a certain amount of pressure, you're not going to have that open door policy. So it's having like a really good sense of self and a really good understanding of your principles, which is, I guess it comes full back into circle of why you need to remind yourself of who you are. and really have that good sense of self. If someone is looking to grow in this area in particular, whether it be entrepreneurship as just their own solopreneur or as a leader within a company, how can they reach you? How can they learn from the lessons that you've learned throughout your entire career?
Best way to do that is, well, follow me on social media, right? You just, if you Google my name, Pat Slattery, you'll find me. I would say to people, if you have any questions or any way I can support you, just reach out. Email me at pat@patslattery.com, or just jump on my website and join my mailing list. By the way, I don't spam people with a whole pile of emails. You don't hear from me that often. Anything I send to you will be something of value. So just feel free to reach out either through social media or to pat@patslattery.com.
Just a last piece of advice that you could give to anyone, if you can just sum it up. What would be the first thing that you wish you told yourself when you were just beginning?
Keep going. You're doing okay. Keep going, because it's so easy to spot the challenges. It's so easy to be reminded by society and everything else. Everybody wants to catch you failing. Just remind yourself of your wins every day. Every day, catch yourself winning. Catch other people winning. Catch people doing things right. And make sure you compliment people and compliment yourself. Just keep going. You're doing okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that wraps up today's episode of Vibrant Living Diaries. It has been an absolute pleasure having you with us. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing your expertise and to the International Wellness Alliance for making this possible. Remember, the insights and stories we've shared today are steps towards embracing a life of holistic fulfillment. We hope you've been inspired to take the next step forward in your own wellness journey. As always, we're eager to hear your thoughts and experiences. Connect with us on our social media platforms and feel free to share how you're integrating the knowledge gained here into your daily life. Your journey is important to us, and we look forward to growing together. I'm Danielle Grobman, and can't wait to continue this journey with you in our next episode. Until then, keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the vibrant life you deserve. Speak soon.